Good evening. Welcome. Welcome to our Hangout on Air where we're covering Nickel and the queries you can do with it today. On today's Hangout, we have Don Pinto, Product Manager in Couchbase, and we'll be hearing from Gerald Sangudi, Architect of Nickel. During this Hangout, please feel free to ask any questions you have via the Q&A in the Hangout below. And if you have any other suggestions for future topics, please feel free just to let me know. It's laura@couchbase.com. We're always looking to engage with our community. If you want to see more live demos, Gerald will be doing a demo shortly. But if you're looking for any interesting topics that you'd like to see covered or hear from us, please do let us know. So, Don, I'd like to hand it over to you and to Gerald. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. And welcome, Gerald. And it's great to see you and for you to present at this Hangout. So, and thanks, everyone, for joining us on this live session, no matter where you are. And thank you for your interest in Nickel here. So we're here to talk about Nickel. And so, Gerald, why don't you give us a quick introduction about yourself and what you do on the Nickel team?
Great, thank you, Don. It's great to see you on this forum, and welcome to all of our listeners. So briefly, my name is Gerald Sangudi. As Laura said, I'm Chief Architect at Couchbase. I'm responsible for Nickel. So, we're really excited to bring this technology to you all and to talk about it today.
Excellent. So, Gerald, let's take a few steps back, right? I mean, why don't you kind of help us remember how did this project get kicked off at Couchbase? You've been driving this project for a while, and so walk us into the history a little bit about Nickel and how it kind of started at Couchbase.
Sure. So it's been over 2 years. Nickel itself, there was a precursor to Nickel. There's always been an interest at Couchbase in providing our users the ability to do rich querying. There was an effort called Uncle in the past that some of our longtime users might remember. And Nickel really is the final push to actually deliver a full-fledged query capability, query language, query engine, production grade, all of that for our users. So we're really very excited. We are just on the cusp of releasing Couchbase Server 4.0, our biggest release ever. Nickel is kind of one of the headline features in Couchbase Server 4.0. We've had a small team here working for over 2 years, designing, brainstorming, building, sweating, laughing, putting all this together. As we'll talk about today, we really tried to bring together SQL and JSON. And along the way, we ended up collaborating with academics at UC San Diego, UC Irvine, lots of people across Couchbase, feedback from our users. We've had lots of very engaged community users, beta users. So all of those voices and efforts coming together is what has brought Nickel, has made it available to everyone today.
Cool. So it looks that you guys have had a fun time building Nickel and all the other stuff surrounding Nickel. So, just going back again in time, and a lot of people here might be familiar with SQL. So, how different is Nickel compared to SQL? I mean, if there are, what are the differences between the two?
Sure. It's actually very similar. If you are familiar with SQL, if you know SQL, everything that you've learned in SQL, you completely get to keep, right? You don't get to throw anything away that you learned from SQL. What is different is that Nickel adds to SQL really features to make it really work well with JSON. So if you think about SQL data versus JSON data, SQL data is flat, it's tabular, and you have multiple tables that you can combine together in your queries. With JSON data can be flat, but it can also be rich and complex. It can be nested, it can have encapsulation, you can have entire business objects with parent and child components, you've got arrays. And so all of that richness that's available to you in JSON, Nickel lets you work with that as well. So in addition to letting you work with flat structures, you can work with really complex, arbitrary JSON, reach into any part of the JSON object, do any kind of querying, produce any kind of result, combine multiple JSON documents, join them, update any part of the JSON document. So essentially any kind of data access, data transformation, data manipulation that you may want to do with JSON, you can do using Nickel. And that's really what sets it apart from standard SQL.
Excellent. So you talked about a couple of interesting keywords here. You talked about parsing, you talked about execution of this query, you talked about querying as a whole. Can you kind of describe, again, going back to a query when it's kind of issued to by an application? What is typically the lifetime of a Nickel query as it executes in Couchbase?
Yeah, thanks, Don. So this is actually my favorite thing to talk about is what happens under the hood. So when you issue a query to Couchbase, if your query is properly indexed and everything works properly and it's properly designed, you get your response back within a couple of milliseconds. So really slow, single-digit milliseconds or even faster. During that time, a lot of things happen. Right? I call it sort of the life cycle of a query. You first get the request. So Couchbase is a clustered database, so it sits on several nodes. We have what are called smart clients, which know the topology of the cluster. They know where the query services are running inside of the cluster. They load balance your queries. So the client will pick out a node that has the query service enabled. It will send your query to that node, along with parameters and settings and sort of options for executing the query. For example, how much parallelism you want to employ in executing that query. We will first parse the query. So query engine is really sort of a compiler, a runtime, I/O. It's all of those things together. It's like a little computer in there. So we will parse your query. We will, with that, we'll produce what's called an abstract syntax tree. And then we look at, all right, what's the best way to execute this query? Right? We go through a process called a planning and optimization phase, where we say, all right, what data does this query need to access? What indexes are available to enhance and accelerate the performance of this query? What operations do we need to perform? What computations did the user request that need to be performed after the data is accessed? At the end of all of that, what you get is an optimized execution plan. We then pass that execution plan to our query engine runtime, which then executes this using a set of workers in a pipeline with many-stage execution pipeline. And then finally, we decide, okay, in what form does the user want the results? Do you want to perform some post-processing, some aggregation, some projection? So, for example, if you only want particular fields within your documents, we do that at the end of executing the query. We do what's called a projection. Finally, we stream the results back to the user. So as the first result is available, we don't wait until everything is available. We start streaming them back as soon as they're prepared, so that your application can begin to consume the data and do whatever application logic is required for your end users. So all of this is what happens within those 2 milliseconds that you're waiting for between sending us your query and waiting for your results.
Cool. So the thing that caught me at the end, Gerald, is a 2 millisecond thing that you mentioned. So is Nickel really fast, or how fast is Nickel?
It is
what
designed,
makes it so? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's a tool, and like any tool, it can be used well and sort of used better, right? And so it is a tool. It can be used very fast with proper design of your data, proper design of your indexes, and then ultimately it depends on really how much data you need to touch, how much we need to fetch, how much computation we need to do. So we range from sub-millisecond to to sort of longer times. But Couchbase, people come to Couchbase for really operational database performance, high speed at scale, low latency. And so Nickel is really tuned to that. So for what are called operational queries, where you're just doing a lookup, kind of needle in a haystack type queries, looking at top 10 users, by some activity, or searching by, match an email address or domain. Those kinds of queries, when indexed properly, are very fast with Nickel.
Cool. So you talked about indexes. So what are the couple of types of indexes that does Nickel use today, or is capable of using?
Sure. So first of all, there are 2 indexing technologies. Couchbase has traditionally had what is called a view indexing technology, which is very good, has served our users well, but is sort of geared to, is more specialized. And I'll talk about that in a bit about what that is best for. With Nickel, we're also delivering what are called global secondary indexes. And these are very exciting. The indexes designed specifically for use with Nickel, they work very well. They work very well in the Couchbase architecture. So, for example, if you have a lot of background write activity, updating these indexes doesn't interfere with your write workload. You can also have many, many more of these new indexes than you could have view indexes previously. So it's a really very powerful indexing technology. I briefly want to mention that with global secondary indexes, you can not only index simple data attributes, you can also index nested fields, nested data. You can create an index on a function of the data, so what are called functional indexes. So you can say create index on A plus B, or create index on uppercase of the name. So this is, again, very powerful. You can create indexes on multiple expressions at a time. These are what are called composite indexes. And what that lets you do is it makes your indexes more selective, right? So if you index on email address and last name, that is more selective than just an index on last name, right? So if it's indexed on Smith, well, that would have a lot of hits. But if it's Smith that happens to also be in the gmail.com domain, that's a more selective index. If that matches your query, it makes your searches much faster. The final thing I want to mention about these new global secondary indexes is that we also have what are called partial indexes. So if you have a very large data set, you can create one index on a subset of the data, another index on a different subset of the data. What that does is that it lets your indexes remain smaller than your overall data set, and so your indexes are easier to maintain, they're faster to read, and they just work better. So overall theme is just performance, performance, performance.
Cool. So if I'm a developer, Gerald, and I'm kind of using Nickel, and I love the capabilities, I also have a lot of tools like reporting tools and other tools in my ecosystem. So does Nickel really work well with these tools, or what is the current strategy for Nickel to kind of integrate with these tools?
Yeah. Again, so part of the reason, there's several reasons we're really excited to bring Nickel to the community. One of the reasons is just developer productivity. So to let you really develop your applications, develop much richer applications, much more expressive language. You don't have to do sort of data query logic inside of the application, and you don't have to write MapReduce views unless you need that extra capability. So one of the key features is developer enablement, right? Another key feature is really what you asked about, which is ecosystem integration. So right out of the box, Nickel comes with ODBC and JDBC drivers. These drivers support both Nickel, which is enhanced SQL enhanced with JSON capability. So you feed SQL into the driver, and the driver talks Nickel on the back end to Couchbase and gives you back SQL results. What this means is that you can now plug in your favorite BI tool, ETL tool, Tableau, Informatica, Excel, directly on top of Couchbase, and you instantly visualizing, connecting, reporting, and integrating other applications and systems with Couchbase. So in short, Nickel is very much integration ready.
Cool. That's awesome. So Gerald, that's a little bit of the meaty questions of some of the under the hood of Nickel. So do you have any kind of quick demo that our viewers can see on how this all comes together in let's say a particular use case, for example?
I do.
Okay, so awesome. Let's see it.
Share my screen and show you our online tutorial. Can you see my screen, though?
Yes, I can. So Gerald, before you get started, I think I think you mentioned online tutorial. So can you talk a little bit on, like, I didn't see you set up Nickel or do anything here. So yeah, how does this work? I mean, where can I get this tutorial? And do I have to install Nickel to even play with this?
Okay, so no, one of the things that we really wanted to do was to make it very easy to get started with Couchbase and Nickel. So this is just a public website. It's a live interactive tutorial. You can type any query that you'd like. It is at query.couchbase.com. So you should all bookmark that. But so this is the public tutorial site that I'm going to use here. And over and above the public site, if you install Couchbase Server 4.0, which is currently in beta and will GA soon, you get your own private copy of this live interactive tutorial as well. Okay. So with your private install, you can change the tutorial, you can change the data, and really get to play hands-on with Nickel right off the bat without having to write an application. So it's really very accessible. And again, it's query.couchbase.com. And part of the spirit here is to make it very easy for you all to get started with Nickel. We're also going to be putting out sample applications, actual live applications where you can play with Couchbase applications directly without install. We'll provide VMs. So we're really, as part of this launch of Couchbase 4.0, we're really giving you a very, very low on-ramp to get started with Couchbase.
Yeah, this looks exciting. So let's see a few queries, Joe.
All right, let's query on. So I'm first going to highlight this simple query. Do you see what I have highlighted?
Yes.
All right, so select hello world as greeting. This is our hello world. And the result, which I'm going to highlight next, is hello world as JSON. So you always get, with Nickel, you always get an array of results. It's always JSON. In this case, there's a single result. It's labeled greeting, and the content is hello world, just as you'd expect from this query. Cool. Let me just click on index here and walk you through the outline of the tutorial. So there are several sections. It walks you through from slide 1 until about slide 54. These are all just progressively more and more advanced and all very interesting. So just to pick one here, let me do, let's try string concatenation first. So here we have a data set that contains first name and last name. And we are going to concatenate those two and produce a list of full names. Cool. So this is showing a couple of things. One is the concatenation, and the other is that you're getting several results back. So let me just add to this and also add the first name and the last name to the result set, and let's see what we get. All right. So I just live edited the query and added first name and last name to the result in addition to full name. So this gives you a little sample of what you can do with the online tutorial.
Cool. So Gerald,
go ahead, Don.
I had a question. So yeah, what we saw here is concatenation in terms of strings. Does this even work with, let's say, numeric operations? Are there any functions for, let's say, if you're a retailer and you want to do some operations on numbers? Do we have anything like that? Does Nickel support anything for
that? Absolutely. So great question. So let me move forward to show an example of that.
Okay.
I'm going to click on our e-commerce. So we have two actual case studies in this tutorial. You see here on the left, I've highlighted e-commerce on slide 32. And when I click on that, this takes us to our sample online store called Dime Store. And as I recall, Dawn, you were instrumental in putting this particular case study together.
Yeah, I remember the Dime Store very dearly.
Great stuff. So let's run this and see how many products we have in our inventory. So this is showing the fact that we have 900 products in our Dime Store. Right? So this is an example. Count star is not only a numeric function, it's also an aggregate function. So, so that speaks to your question. one other example, let me show another example. So there's several slides from this e-commerce use case. Let me do one more here, which is just month-over-month sales report. So I like this because it has a pretty chart on the left. And over here, although this is a fairly complex query, I'm just showing this as an example to give you a sense of sort of the rich and more advanced features that Nickel provides. So it'll take a little while, but essentially this is showing revenue in millions month over month. So May 2013, that's 0.6 million, June 2013, and so on and so forth. So this data is what would produce the chart on the left. The other case study that we have is a social gaming case study. We call a game called Jungleville, and I encourage all of you to play around with that as well and check out some of the Nickel features there.
Cool. This is awesome, Gerald. So Gerald, one another question. There's a lot of things that this tutorial shows. There's like 50 or so slides. Is there anything that the viewers can learn about what's added in the upcoming 4.0 release, which might not be in this tutorial? Are there any features for Nickel along those lines?
Sure. So Nickel is really new in 4.0 in terms of a GA product. What we've had so far, we've been doing what are called developer previews of Nickel. And so we started with DP1 back in late 2013. We've had DP2, 3, and 4, gotten lots of feedback from the community, from enterprise customers. And so, Couchbase Server 4.0 with Nickel, the first GA version of Nickel, is really the culmination of all of those efforts. In terms of what's new, I think the biggest thing is that the query engine, Nickel, is finally fully integrated into the Couchbase server. So it's not a separate download anymore. It's not a separate install. It's not a preview. It's actually, you install Couchbase server. The query service is enabled by default. You get Nickel. You get secondary indexing. Everything is fully integrated. In terms of features that are available for the first time in GA, there are several of these, sort of more advanced features. So I really, it's just been a slow progression. I'll highlight joins. Those are fairly advanced. I'll highlight DML, so update, delete, insert, bulk insert, merge. So lots of really, lots of interesting features.
Cool. And so, Gerald, one last question: like, is there one thing that you like, folks to take away from this Hangout? Like, it's a great demo, and this was really exciting to see all, all the capabilities that Nickel has, and used in two different use cases here. But I'm sure there are several others that you've heard about. So, what are some of the few things that you like our viewers to take home today?
Sure. So there are a couple of I'll make a broader point about what the big takeaway is. Before I do that, I want to give our users a couple of secrets to remember, right? Really key things to remember. One is there's this feature called use keys, which lets you bypass indexes altogether. When you happen to know the primary key of the data that you want to access, this gives you really high-speed key value access via Nickel. So you really get the boost of key value as well as query by providing your primary keys directly in the query using the use keys clause. The other little kind of secret is what we call explain. So this explain operator, you just take your query or your update statement, stick explain in front of it, and that tells you how the system would execute your query, what indexes it would use, what pipeline it would set up, how it would perform this query. And this is a critical tool for performance tuning, for really diagnosing your queries. And so explain is your best friend, and I want our users to remember that. In terms of the final high-level takeaway, what we've tried to do here is JSON is great. We all love JSON because of the flexible data model, the schema flexibility, the developer productivity, the fact that it really matches your application data model. You don't have this impedance. You're not constantly, going between database representation and then application representation. So that's really powerful about JSON. At the same time, SQL is really just awesome for querying. It's declarative, it's really expressive, it's powerful, it's mature, built on a mathematical foundation, and we're all, familiar with it. And so the big high-level takeaway is that Nickel really brings these two things together and gives you the best of both worlds. You really get the ability to do, SQL-like querying on your JSON data, and you really get, you can really have it all. So that's the high-level takeaway for our users.
Thank you so much, Gerald. So this was exciting. So I'd like our viewers to, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A. I don't see any questions here. So I'm sure our viewers will kind of give us some feedback after this Hangout will also be posted online, so you can watch it offline at your leisure and provide us with some great feedback and questions for Gerald and the Nickel team. Thank you again, once again, Gerald.
Thank you so much, Don. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. So I just want to remind our listeners here today of two things. Query.couchbase.com, interactive tutorial for all you to use. I personally found it very interesting, and it's quite nice to see the actual way you can do the step-by-step guide. And the second thing is, if you do use Nickel and you have any questions, you encounter any questions you want to get answered, please look at forums.couchbase.com. Many of the questions have already been answered, but also we're always there to help you no matter what. If you ask a question, Gerald or Don or somebody will actually be able to answer those questions for you on forums.couchbase.com. And again, if you're looking for any future conversational topics that you'd like to hear from, please drop me an email at laura@couchbase.com. So thank you once again to Don and to Gerald for taking part in today's Hangout.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.